Have you ever accidentally crashed a funeral and ended up giving the best eulogy of your life? I'm 22 and work as a delivery driver. Last month, I had to drop off catering supplies at St. Mark's Church for what I thought was a wedding reception. I was running late, stressed about my boss yelling at me, and rushed into the wrong entrance wearing my uniform polo and khakis. The moment I walked in, I realized something was very wrong. Everyone was dressed in black. There was a casket at the front, and about 50 people were sitting in complete silence. But before I could back out quietly, this elderly woman in the front row turned around, saw me, and started crying. "Oh my God, you came," she sobbed, getting up and walking toward me. "I wasn't sure you'd make it." I stood there frozen as she hugged me tight. Everyone in the church was now staring at us. I had absolutely no idea what was happening, but this woman was clearly having an emotional moment. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, thinking she had me confused with someone else. "I think there's been a mistake." But she just squeezed me harder and said, "Don't be modest, honey. David talked about you all the time. He'd be so happy you're here." That's when it hit me. She thought I was someone who knew the dead guy. The whole church was watching this reunion, and I didn't have the heart to tell this grieving woman she was wrong. The pastor walked over and asked if I wanted to say a few words about David. My mind went completely blank. I'd never met David in my life, but 60 pairs of eyes were staring at me expectantly. The woman who'd hugged me nodded encouragingly and whispered, "Please, he would have wanted you to speak." I walked to the front of the church with no plan whatsoever. Standing behind that podium, looking out at all these mourning faces, I realized I had to say something. So I started talking about what I imagined David was like based on the few clues I'd picked up. "David was the kind of person who made an impression," I began, my voice shaking. "Even when you only knew him briefly, he stayed with you. He had this way of making everyone feel important, like they mattered." I could see people nodding, so I kept going. "I may not have known David as long as all of you, but I could tell he was someone who brought people together. Someone who cared about family, about community, about making sure nobody felt left out." The elderly woman was crying again, but smiling through her tears. Then I said something that came from nowhere. "David believed that strangers are just friends you haven't met yet. And looking around this room, seeing all of you here today, I think that says everything about the kind of man he was." The entire church erupted in sobs. People were hugging each other, nodding, saying, "That's so David, and he always said that." I had apparently nailed his entire personality by complete accident. After the service, at least 20 people came up to thank me for my words. The elderly woman, who turned out to be David's mother, kept saying my eulogy captured him perfectly. His brother shook my hand and said, "You really understood him." That's when I learned the truth that made everything even more incredible. David had been a delivery driver too. He'd worked for a different company, but apparently spent his whole career talking about how delivery drivers were invisible to most people, and how he always tried to make them feel appreciated. His mother had seen my uniform and thought I was one of the drivers David had befriended over the years. She'd been hoping someone from his work life would show up, but his company hadn't sent anyone. I was the answer to her prayers, even though I was completely the wrong person. The best part? David's brother pulled me aside and said, "You know what the crazy thing is? David always used to say that if he died, he hoped some random person would show up at his funeral and say nice things about him, because that would mean he'd made a real impact on the world." I stood there realizing that I'd accidentally fulfilled a dead man's wish. A guy I'd never met had somehow used me to prove his own point about human connection. When I finally explained that I was just a lost delivery driver, his family said it made the whole thing even more perfect. David's mom still sends me Christmas cards. And now whenever I make deliveries, I always try to chat with people for a minute, because you never know when a small interaction might end up meaning everything to someone.